Good afternoon, folks, and thanks for joining us. We are the MMA Sucka crew. My name is Tim Wheaton, joined as always by Frazer Crone. Frazer, what's going on today? How are you doing, sir?
Yeah, so good, mate. We've been talking about this for a few weeks now, and we said that we're lucky that we didn't do our end of year awards before UFC 269. Disclaimer: we're doing it before the Derek Lewis versus Chris Darkins card. So if Lewis lands a flying roundhouse kick off the fence, backflip KO, it's not included. Nothing from next weekend's card is included in our end of year. If like I say, there's a crazy knockout, crazy submission, crazy fight. We'll talk about that on the first show of the new year. But yeah, schedules haven't quite aligned that we can fit in Derek Lewis's rolling thunder KO just yet. So
Rolling Thunder. Okay. It's funny because with the upset of the year, when we were originally scheduling to do our end of the year awards, it actually would have included like Sergio Pettis and Kyoji Horiguchi. And I thought, wow, we dodged a bullet there. And then we wouldn't have had Juliana Pena beating up Amanda Nunes. So we would have looked absolutely like fools. But let's jump into it. So we have our end of the year. This is the MMA Sucka end of the year awards for 2021. It was a great year for MMA. It was a great year for kickboxing, Muay Thai, and it was a great year, particularly for the UFC. They had a lot of marquee fights this year. It's crazy to think this year there was two big storylines this year, I think, in terms of what was happening inside the cage. Outside the cage, we had storylines like talking about fighter pay was the big thing this year, but inside the cage, two main things: Dustin Poirier and and Conor McGregor and Kamaru Usman. I think those were the two biggest items of this year, and that just gives credence to how big this year was, because we look back and those were big stories. Those were huge fights. So we have the slide deck up. We have the presentation going. Let's jump into it, Frazer. Launch us into it. Set the table.
yeah, so the first one we're going to talk about is just male fighter of the year. There's obviously a lot of options for this one. Like Sim just said, Dustin Poirier probably fell out of that conversation after he lost to Charles Oliveira.
Mm-hmm.
Charles Oliveira was in the conversation. Max Holloway, I think his performance over Calvin Qatar goes slightly under the radar in these kind of awards because it wasn't a big knockout. I'd say that was the performance of the year. If you did decision victory of the year, it'd probably be that. But that's not really a topic that we do.
Yeah.
Islam Makhachev's got 3 wins. Started the year with a win over Drew Dober, the main event win against Thiago Moises, and then obviously recently over Dan Hooker. Then you forget the sort of lower down the sort of rankings guys. You got Vicente Luca, 2 big finish wins against Michael Chiesa and Tyron Woodley, and Derek Brunson, the sort of career revival, as it were, with the wins over Till and the dominant win over Kevin Holland. But we were the same on this one. There's no denying for us. Male fighter of the year, it's got to be Kamaru Usman, is it not?
Absolutely. Kamaru Usman answered a lot of questions this year. He had 3 wins this year against top-ranked opponents. He defended his title 3 times. And the reason that we picked him as well is because it kind of told the story. He wasn't grinding out close decisions. He answered questions of a guy who's struggled with finishing fights for his whole career. Or people have been arguing like, you lead against the cage against Jorge Masvidal. You tickled his toes the whole fight. Well, he answered those questions this year. He knocked out Gilbert Burns, he knocked out Jorge Masvidal, and he outstruck and out-wrestled Colby Covington. Those are 3 massive wins at welterweight, and now he is actually in the discussion that we are talking about Kamaru Usman, George St. Pierre at welterweight. He has had such a great year. You picked Kamaru Usman as well. Talk us through it. What was the reason?
Yeah, for sure. I picked him because he was the fighter of the year, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's echoing exactly what you've said. It's the level of competition that he's facing as well. These aren't just, with the greatest respect to, Amanda Nunes. If she even would have got the win over Juliana Pena, I don't think she would have been my female fighter of the year, because it's the level of competition that she's fighting. We all agreed that Jorge Masvidal, having taken the fight on short notice the first time around against Kamaru Usman, deserved a rematch, and he got the rematch, and Usman showed improvements in that rematch and knocked him out cold. And it's, spoiler, it's on our contenders for knockout of the year. It's a phenomenal knockout. It's a fairly simple 1-2, but the way it landed was just phenomenal. He dropped Gilbert Burns after being dropped himself. Kamaru Usman, this is, to being dropped himself, or at least hurt himself in the first round against Gilbert Burns. He rallied and dropped him with a jab and dominated him. And against Colby Covington, he showed vast improvements from their first bout. That the first bout, let's be honest, it was close. It could have gone either way before Kamaru finished it in the final round. But he showed so many more improvements against Covington that, for me, there's no denial. And it's not even that. It's just the fact that he's made such improvements in his own stand-up game as well. He's no longer the awkward sort of double jab to double leg takedown or double jab to get your opponent up against the fence. He's now happy to stand and bang with these guys. And yeah, male fight of the year, Kamaru Usman. I don't think, I'd be, although, we named a short list of the guys, Max Holloway, Cyril Gane, brilliant years for these guys, but the level of competition and the way that Kamaru Usman's finishing these guys and dominating these guys, it's hard to look elsewhere.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's just been a marquee year, and you cannot tell the story of this year without Kamaru Usman. Like that is the guy who absolutely told the story this year. So it is great to see that we both picked Kamaru, because I completely agree. I think this was his year and won it in emphatic fashion. I don't know what else to add on this guy. And I think looking at the rest of welterweight's a division who hasn't changed its rankings very much over the last 2 to 3 years. So most of the top 5 have been cleared out. Most of them have not, or they're not on a win streak right now. Looking into 2022, Kamaru might still be champion coming into 2023, given the roster of contenders. There's not a clear number 1 contender there, and no one has really put their name in the mud, right? No one's really stamped a fight here.
Yeah, exactly. I think next for him will probably be Leon Edwards.
Probably, yeah.
And that's just because of strength of schedule for Leon Edwards. Yes, he hasn't been that active, but you can't kind of deny a person on that big a win streak. And next year I wouldn't be surprised to see him fight maybe only twice, Leon Edwards and Vicente Luque, and let Khamzat Chimaev sort of build himself up a little bit more, have a few more tests for Chimaev, because Kamaru Usman's not stupid. He knows how good Khamzat Chimaev is.
Yes.
So why not give him another year to maybe edge out some potential flaws, let him face a Vicente Luque or Leon Edwards and see how well they do against him, because you want to catch Khamzat Chimaev before he gets too good, but you also want to know a lot more about him, because let's be honest, we don't know an awful lot about Khamzat Chimaev, despite the fact he's got 4 UFC fights. How good is he? Yes, he's taken all of his opponents down and mauled them apart from, 3 of his 4, and then he's knocked Gerald Marshall out in one shot. But how good is Khamzat Chimaev? We don't know yet. And like I say, Kamaru Usman wants to catch Khamzat before he gets too good. Yeah. But he also wants to maybe learn a little bit more about him beforehand.
Yeah, we've not seen him pressured. We don't know what it's like when you put him against the cage. We don't know a lot of things because he keeps running through guys. Khamzat Chimaev, he would have been breakout star of the year, but he fought once this year. And I think still Khamzat maybe took the biggest storylines of the year. Anyway, let's move forward. Female fighter of the year. This was a tough one to pick because I don't think that there was one female fighter who really put their stamp on the year. Like you said, even if Amanda Nunes had beaten Julianne Peña, it still wouldn't have been her due to level of competition. Completely agree with you here. The other female fighter of the year, I maybe Kayla Harrison. She went undefeated as well, but same, like we're talking about level of competition here. Rose Namajunas beat Weili Zhang twice. Yep, those are all really good. Move forward on it. Let's see who we got for female fighter of the year.
Female fighter. We disagree on this one.
And I love it. And for different reasons as well. Female fighter of the year, Frazer Crone chooses Marina Rodriguez. And I thought you would. We talked about her in the past. Myself, I chose Stamp Fairtex. Frazer, go ahead and break it down.
Yeah, I'm a massive fan of Marina Rodriguez. Like I've said, we've broke I think 2 of her fights down already. She's 3-0 in the UFC this year, and it's the willingness to take the fight against Michelle Waterson at 125 pounds and dominate that fight. They were set to compete, I think, but obviously down at 115. It's a natural weight class. She's been phenomenal this season. The win over Amanda Ribas at the beginning of the year, where she knocked her out twice. Let's be honest, it's poor refereeing, but she knocked Amanda Ribas out twice. Really good work by Marina Rodriguez, and she can do it all. We've seen her against Mackenzie Dern to sort of close her year out, as it were, in the main event, dominate Mackenzie Dern. And I think, she's not quite a big enough name yet, but if I was Joanna Jędrzejczyk, I'd be calling for Marina Rodriguez fight at the beginning of next year to get straight back in there, because a winner of Marina Rodriguez for Joanna would do really well. And and vice versa. You know, a win over the former champion in Joanna would catapult Marina Rodriguez into the title picture. I think she matches up well against Rose Namajunas as well, in my opinion. You know, she's long, like Rose is long. You know, we've seen Rose fight Zhang Weili twice this year. Zhang's fight's quite short and compact, and you know everything's tight, and you know she's throwing a lot of power into every shot. Whereas Marina Rodriguez is a lot like Rose Namajunas. She's sort of the Dutch kickboxing style of in, jab, out, leg kick, out. You know, she doesn't have to put power into everything. She fights a little bit like Max Holloway as well. She'll kill you with 1,000 shots rather than just trying to kill you with one shot. And I think, you know, her against Rose Namajunas is a fight that I'd really like to see. I doubt that it's going to happen anytime soon because you've got, you know, Carla Espada, who's arguably more deserving of the title shot. And, you know, she's got to face another top contender in a Zhang Weili or a Yang Xiaonan maybe, because she has only got the win over Dern, which, despite the fact it's a good win, Dern's quite one-dimensional, as we saw in that fight of being a jiu-jitsu girl with improving striking, but not quite there yet. So I think Marina Rodriguez, to really solidify as a contender, she's got to get at least one more win, and then she'll be on a 4 or 5 fight win streak. Well, 3 fight win streak this year, and then another win would obviously put her on a 4 fight win streak. And I think, you know, that's the reason I picked her as a female fighter of the year, because she's come out of the woodworkers this time last year. No one's really talking about her. This time this year, you know, she's right in there.
Marina Rodriguez is headlined twice now in the UFC on fight nights. That's kind of a big deal during this era. Not only that, but she had a tough past couple of years, going from a draw to a loss, Carla Esparza and Cynthia Calvillo, to now 3 wins in a row against 3 game opponents. Women's atomweight is an extremely good, or sorry, not women's atom, women's strawweight is an extremely good weight class. And it's exciting to see a new contender. She is absolutely probably fighting for a title by the end of 2022. Like you said, one more win, and she's right in the mix, isn't she?
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, it was, for me, it's because she wasn't the outright favorite going into every one of her fights. I think she was the underdog against Hebas. I think she was probably a slight favorite against Mackenzie Dern, and I can't remember the odds against Michelle Waterson because that was slightly different as it was up at flyweight. But, you know, no one's really considered Valentina Shevchenko for female fight of the year, despite the fact she's 2-0 with 2 finishes. But that's because of the level of competition that she's fighting.
Level of competition.
Jessica Andrade, we thought that would be a much closer fight than it was. Dominated her. Yep. Lauren Murphy dominated her. Yes, they're 2, but, you know, everyone's picking Valentina Shevchenko in these fights, and she's going out there and doing what she should be doing as a dominant champion. Not everyone's picking Marina Rodriguez.
Yeah,
you know, people are picking Dern by submission. People are picking Ribas by submission. But Rodriguez is shutting these girls down. I think, you know, I don't see an awful lot of her on social media, which is it's a shame that we even need to mention that, but this, you know, this is modern day MMA, that you need to be more active online. So if she's a little bit more active online, I think, you know, we could, like you say, with one more win next year, I think August time she could be competing probably in a co-main event, because like I say, she's not a huge name, but in a co-main event for a title if Rose Namajunas fights early on in the year.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. Now, my female fighter of the year, I chose Stamp Fairtex. She had a marquee year. She turned 24 years old this year, and already she has made a name for herself in women's atomweight combat sports. She started the year by losing to Aliana Rossiana, which was meant to be like an easy fight. Her next fight, she beat Aliana Rossiana. She then beat Julie Mezabarbara, and then she submitted Ritu Fagat to win the women's atomweight Grand Prix, which is absolutely insane that she has held titles in MMA now. And then before she's even 24, she's held titles in kickboxing and Muay Thai as well. Going 3-1 this year, picking up a Grand Prix title. Stamp Fairtex is my female fighter of the year, 2021. I wrote about her earlier in the year, and it took a little while for us to get going in the Grand Prix. Now she's going to be fighting the champion next. And I think she held the biggest story of this year. Going 3-1 in one calendar year, kind of a huge deal. So Stamp Fairtex is my female fighter of the year.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, like you say, to lose and then get the fight back, and to beat Fogar at the end of that was 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago.
Yeah,
that's just capped off of what is let's be honest, a brilliant year. to avenge your only to avenge an early loss and to compete 4 times anyway in a year like we've had is impressive. You know, we're all bigging up Kevin Holland last year for fighting 5 times and getting 5 victories. Well, Stamp has fought 4 times, got 3 victories, but she's beaten everyone that she's fought this year.
That's true.
Makes sense, you know.
That's a good point.
And to top it off, she hasn't just, you know, arguably, you know, a sort of feather in her cap over Marina Rodriguez is that not only has she got these victories, but she's got it kind of solidified with the Grand Prix victory. You know, she's got that sort of, although it's not a title, it's an accomplishment. You know, Rodriguez, yes, she's fought in 2 UFC main events, but she hasn't got that sort of accolade to it yet. Whereas, you know, Fairtex has. So yeah, I can fully understand why you went for Stamp.
Let's keep an eye out for her. She's going to be fighting for a while. She's only 24 years old now. Let's move forward. What do we got next? Is it knockout of the year or do we got fight of the year up next?
We have fight of the year, where fight again we disagree ever so slightly.
I absolutely love it. Fight of the year, some capital fights this year that were just balls to the wall entertaining. Some other examples of ones that were on the table, such as Gaethje versus Chandler at UFC 268. We also had Oliveira Chandler at UFC 262. Yan versus Sandhagen. It was my choice. We also had Sandhagen versus Dillashaw. Okrayun versus Christian Lee from One Championship. Some absolutely amazing fights this year. You chose the featherweight showdown between Alexander Volkonovsky versus Brian Ortega. Break it down. Set the table, Frazer.
Yeah, I was originally, you know, just when sort of thinking about this, when go around at work, when I'm always constantly thinking about MMA and I probably should be thinking about work, I was thinking, you know, Chandler Gaethje is my fight of the year. But with that being said, 3 rounds, you know, it was a 3-round war. Could those guys have done it for another 10 minutes? Maybe one would have fallen, but Volkanovsky and Ortega going into it, you know, Ortega had coming off the Korean Zombie win where he looked phenomenal, and you know Volkanovsky's coming off the back-to-back fights with Holloway, where he looked really good. You know, there was questions going into it, and there was needle between the 2 guys after their little stint on the Ultimate Fighter as coaches.
That's true.
And the fight didn't disappoint. You know, I've watched it I think 2 or 3 times, and what made this fight so good for me is that it was on a knife edge the whole time. You know, although Volkanovsky dominated the 4th round, Ortega came back out and won the 5th round. The mounted guillotine, where we've all seen that picture of Volkanovsky, where you know the veins are popping in his head, his eyes are going. He was, and he's admitted, seconds away from going out. For me, and especially because it was competed over 5 rounds, and you know, similar to your pick, over 5 rounds, it could have gone either way. You know, I picked Volkanovsky to win going in, and after the fact, you know, before the official announcement, it was going towards Volkanovsky for me. For Ortega couldn't have taken that kind of a beating in the 4th. I think it was the 4th round or the 3rd round, and where it was, you know, he could barely make it back to his corner. He wasn't going to win that fight, and it's the age-old, you know, Nick and Nate Diaz thing. If that fight would have continued to go on, he was only losing that fight, in my opinion.
That's true. It's a good fight.
Yeah,
it's a great fight.
I just really enjoyed it, as you know, and mainly because of the danger that both men were in throughout the fight. It wasn't a dominant Max Holloway versus Calvin Qatar. You know, that can't for me be fight of the year, because Max Holloway was never in danger in that fight, despite the fact it was performance of the year, in my opinion. He was never ever losing that fight.
Yeah.
Whereas there was points where Volkanovsky, you know, the mounted guillotine, could have lost the fight, and there was points where Ortega, when he was being ground and pounded, the referee could have easily stepped in. So yeah, you know, it could have gone. There's points in the fight where I thought, you know, this is it. You know, Ortega's finally got his title. He's choked it out. Oh wait, no, he's not. Oh, well, okay, wow. And then, you know, it was. And, you know, to top it all off, it was for a belt as well. It wasn't just a main event. But, yeah, Yan and Sandhagen was certainly, you know, top 3 on my shortlist. So, yeah, what was your reasoning behind Yan and Sandhagen?
Well, one of the interesting things I want to talk about with Volkanovsky versus Ortega, I think that fight works best from a live sporting perspective, you have to not know the result of that fight for it to really be that much more exciting. I knew the result by the time I watched that fight. And for me, I was like, oh, he's going to get out of the guillotine because I know the result. That's boring. That's lame. That fight can only exist in its live scenario. That fight is so good because it was live, right? Like that fight, you have to not know the results for it to really work. So I don't even know if that fight, like 2 years from now, if we would recommend it of like one of the greatest fights in MMA history, because it is so good live, right? Like not knowing the result is absolutely insane.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've never thought about it like that, to be honest. You know, Gaethje and Chandler or Jan and Sandhagen, they're going to be good fights whether you watch them today, tomorrow, or in 3 years. You know, Adesanya and Calvin Gastelum from a few years ago. I've watched that fight.
So
I could watch that fight today and still be on the edge of my seat, knowing that, you know, Adesanya scores best part of what 2 or 3 knockdowns in the final round. Irrelevant, you know, it's still a phenomenal war. And
true.
Yeah, I agree with the fact that if you don't know the result, it's going to be a hell of a lot more exciting when he's stuck in that guillotine, because you're thinking, especially if you know the background of both fighters, if you know how good Ortega is on the ground, you know just how good Volkanovsky must be on the ground to get out of it.
Yeah.
You know, from a casual fan perspective, they don't know anything about Ortega. They don't know anything about Volkanovsky. They're not going to know how good Ortega is on the ground. So when he's got him in the mounted guillotine, they probably don't think into it as much as you know, me or you would, having, you know, watched it live for the first time and thinking once Ortega gets that black belt squeeze on, it's done. But clearly, you know, it wasn't.
It's absolutely insane fight. For my fight of the year, I did pick Petr Yan versus Corey Sandhagen. This was just like, oh, these guys were so close in terms of this is for the number one guy at bantamweight, and there was an interim title on the line, but much more realistically, this was for the top guy at bantamweight. Both guys were coming off losses officially, but both, like, arguably Sandhagen had beaten Dillashaw, and arguably Petr Yan, under a different set of rules, had beaten Aljamain Sterling. A grounded knee, that's allowed in some parts of mixed martial arts, so maybe he won that fight in a different world. But this fight, just a back and forth, a technical, brilliant fight in terms of, we saw adjustments over the fight. We saw adjustments over the first round. We saw them game plan for each other before the fight even started. We knew that both of these guys had watched tape on each other and drilled and planned for each other's strengths and weaknesses. They knew what they were expecting. We saw not too many takedown attempts, but not too many successful takedown attempts. We saw submission attempts in this fight, including an ankle lock early in the round. Just an absolutely insane fight where it didn't let up over 5 rounds as well. We saw adjustments over the full 5 rounds, and it kind of never stopped till the final bell. The last 2 minutes of this fight was better than anything else in this whole fight. Absolutely insane stuff. Petr Yan versus Corey Sandhagen was my fight of the year 2021. What do you think of it?
Yeah, I don't think anyone's going to complain with Yan versus Sandhagen as a fight of the year, you know, especially not me. I thought, you know, literally echoing everything that you've just said, it was all action from the start to the end. You know, Yan had Sandhagen hurt because he was clearly the heavier hitter, but Sandhagen was the more active fighter through the first 2 rounds.
Yep.
We know what Sandhagen can do. You know, we saw him against Frankie Edgar with a flying knee earlier on in the year. And, you know, I think, so he's always got that equalizer. And we know, you know, he went to the well against TJ Dillashaw, and then he's had to do it again against Corey Sandhagen. Against Petr Yan.
Yeah.
I think you do have to ask the question of, if he hadn't have gone so deep and had such a war with TJ Dillashaw, would he maybe have had more in the gas tank against Petr Yan?
Very well, yeah.
Potentially, you know, these fights do essentially age you, but at the end of the day, you know, phenomenal fight, and like you say, each man could have won it again. You know, that's what made it so good again, because it isn't the kind of fight where, you know, I hate to bring it up again, but the Holloway versus Qatar performance, dominant, and you would never, although it was, from our perspective, technically phenomenal to watch, from a casual perspective, there's never any danger for Holloway. People don't know how good Calvin Qatar's boxing is, whereas with Sandhagen and Yan, you know, each of them could have mixed in a takedown if they wanted to. Sandhagen's the longer guy, and we know how devastating he can be with his knees and his boxing. Yan has got the superior trips, as we saw against Aljamain Sterling. But how is he going to be over 5 rounds? Because we didn't see him over 5 rounds against Sterling, because it never went that far. Will he gas out? Will Sandhagen work the body like we've seen him work the body before? there's so many questions going into it, and all those questions were answered, you know, at the end of the fight. And yeah, phenomenal fight.
Just absolutely incredible stuff. Let's move forward to the next. What do we got of the year awards?
We have knockout of the year, and this one is where we differ. You know, mine wasn't even on the shortlist for the MMA Sucka official, you know, the site's knockout of the year. But, you know, some honorable mentions go, as we just mentioned, to Sandhagen versus Edgar, the flying knee.
Yeah,
personally couldn't pick that one because nobody, especially not me, likes seeing Frankie Edgar get knocked out.
That's true.
Such a veteran of the game, but you know, you've got to give props to that of the flying knee, and it was clean. It wasn't a flying knee to TKO. It was a flying knee, and Frankie Edgar was out cold. Yeah. We've got Dominic Reyes over Yuri Prochazka over Dominic Reyes, as we've already spoken about. Usman versus Masvidal 2.
Yeah.
Wiley Zhang versus Nama Yunus. Then the first fight, the snap high kick. Miocic versus Ngannou 2, which I think goes under the radar as what is actually a phenomenal knockout, you know, and a phenomenal fight.
Yep.
We got Poirier versus McGregor 2, which I'm sure that you'll talk about soon. Arjun Buller versus Brandon Vera, Reyes versus DJ, and AJ McKee versus
which was a submission, but it's been a century.
Which was a submission, but I mean, he pretty much knocked him out and then submitted him for the sake of submitting him, I feel like. But
that's on me. I made that mistake and no one corrected us for a long time.
I mean, yes, it goes down submission, but I think the sequence that's leading up to submission is phenomenal and you know, needs highlighting itself. But yeah, my personal pick was Hernandez versus Roberts, the spinning wheel kick he was winning the fight anyway. He was cruising to a decision victory, and then he pulls out a spinning kick, and it's, you know, and he's knocked Roberts out cold. We've seen spinning kicks before where the guys landed and TKO'd the guys, had to finish off with punches. But Hernandez out cold Roosevelt Roberts, you know, heard the clapper for the last 10 seconds of the fight, spinning wheel kick, knocks him out cold. That's my knockout of the year, no questions.
And we got one of the best images of the year from it as well. The photo exactly as the strike landed is one of the best photos of the sport. I mean, it's history that when it lands. I think sometimes when we pick knockout of the year, sometimes we pick the story and sometimes we pick the knockout itself. And Bahamundi's versus Roberts is the knockout itself. A spinning wheel kick, absolutely insane. That is amazing stuff. And he was losing up to that point, absolutely insane. For my knockout of the year, I did pick the story instead. So Poirier versus McGregor 2, where Poirier is a little bit behind in the first round, almost got dropped a couple of times, got clobbered a couple of times. I think it represents his entire career. I don't think there was a bigger story of the year than Poirier knocking out McGregor in their second fight, the first fight of this year, but second fight overall. Came back. I think that absolutely lit the world on fire. That set the stage of what the rest of the year was going to be. The UFC wanted to get McGregor into a title shot as quick as possible to, you know, Khabib is leaving now. Let's get him in there as fast as possible. Poirier screwed it all up. And I absolutely love it. Love to see it. It was a great knockout. He came back in this fight, beat him in the third fight as well. But yeah, my knockout of the year is Poirier versus McGregor in their second meeting.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that, you know, like you say, you picked the story, but the knockout itself was set up well with the low leg kicks to buckle McGregor, and then the knockout itself is you see McGregor sort of almost try and dip away from the power side of Poirier. Poirier, as we know, squares up a lot when he throws. He's usually a southpaw, but his power is in the right hand, and it's the sort of looping sort of uppercut hook. It kind of came from a strange angle, landed straight on McGregor, and you know, you just saw McGregor just hit the ground, you know, and it was a phenomenal finish, I think, from Dustin Poirier, and like you say, phenomenal story to go alongside it. That obviously set up the third bout, and like you said before, we officially started. Probably the storyline of the year is the Poirier McGregor rivalry that still isn't over. You know, McGregor took shots at Poirier this weekend after Poirier lost to Charles Oliveira, but you know, get over it, man. You've been knocked out. You broke your leg. It's will we see a fourth fight? Personally, I don't have an awful lot of interest in that, but if Dustin's smart enough, he'll take the fourth fight, because he was winning the second fight of this year until McGregor broke his leg.
Yeah.
comfortably. He's a much the bigger guy, and it's a big payday as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good example of stories. Whenever there's a major story of the year, by the end, we're sick of it. And I'm sick of Poirier McGregor story. Like I don't care at all. But I would be lying if that story didn't set up what everything else was about this year. It was Poirier McGregor. And I'm sick of it now. But there is nothing bigger than that. But let's move forward. We got sub of the year next.
Sub of the year. Yeah.
Wonderful. Some good subs this year. It was actually a really tough pick. Pena versus Nunes was up there as well. We had Hernandez versus Vieira. Luque submitting Woodley. Even Amanda Nunes versus Megan Anderson. Teixeira versus Blachowicz. Insane. There were so many good submissions this year. You picked Muniz versus Jacare. Break it down for us.
Yeah, again, I think I just picked the storyline for this one rather than the submission itself. We didn't have the what was DJ called the mighty whiz bar sort of suplex to armbar this year. We didn't have that sort of standout submission this year. I think technically the best submission would be Amanda Nunes with the inverted triangle over Megan Anderson.
Yeah,
but you've also got to think about the quality of person that is being submitted. Jacare doesn't get submitted, and although technically, if we're going to be technically never tapped, he had his arm snapped by Muniz, but for him to have that happen to him in his last ever UFC fight it's rough, but it's a storyline. The storyline of Muniz going in saying, I'm going to submit Jacare. Everyone's sort of almost getting on his back for disrespecting Jacare, saying, let's be honest, you're not going to submit him. And then going in there and snapping his arm, breaking his arm is phenomenal. And, likewise, it was a tough pick for me because my second pick was going to be Anthony Hernandez versus Rodolfo Friera. Purely for the same storyline. You don't submit these elite jiu-jitsu guys. They're not meant to be submitted. They're meant to be either decisioned because they can't get the fight to the floor or knocked out. And Rodolfo Friera was too big, too muscly, gassed out. And, I think I remember Joe Rogan saying he's never seen a man that tired. And yes, Hernandez submitted him, but was it a submission or was it just a quit from Vieira because he was too tired? I think it was a mixture of both, but I can't sort of judge him too much because I've just, he was so tired, and it was time for him to get out of the fight.
Yeah, it was a great submission, and it was one of the like statistically impossible things that had happened this year. But I want to talk about Jacare Muniz for just a minute, because one of the stories that I tell people about fighting and about like fighters are too tough for their own good. I use Jacare as an example because years ago when he was competing in Mundials, and I think we've all heard this story so many times, and this is probably the wrong version of the story, but years ago when Jacare was competing in Mundials, an opponent had him caught in an armbar, and he knew that if he tapped, he loses. That's it. So he let his opponent break his arm, and then he continued grappling. So he took his broken arm and tucked it in his belt and just continued the grappling with one arm. That's the kind of guy Jacare is. And for Muniz to submit him is absolutely insane. To get the setup, to get to that point, is actually kind of insane. But also mentally break someone's arm is not an easy thing to do for a submission. Even though we see it every once in a while, like Frank Mir has broken a few people's arms, but it's actually not that common because it's hard to do mentally. Georges St. Pierre, remember that against Dan Hardy? He could have broken the arm, and mentally he couldn't quite get over, like, I'm going to snap this man's arm in half. Muniz just did it. He just went for it, submitted Jacare. It's a pretty insane storyline. It's a great submission. What do you think, Frazer?
Yeah, for sure. And, he's now got three wins in the UFC, all via armbar. He got a win this past weekend over Eric Anders via armbar as well. And I watched a post-fight press conference. He says, I can tap Israel Adesanya. Well, we'll see. Maybe. We'll see if that ever come to fruition, but he hasn't been wrong since. And he called for a fight with Darren Till. If I'm Darren Till, I stay as far away from that fight as possible. My ground game's not good, and Muniz is phenomenal. I stay away from that fight. I avoid that like the plague, and pursue the Uriah Hall fight if I'm Darren Till, because Uriah Hall's not going to try and take me down. And I might even be the one initiating takedowns. I don't want anything to do with Muniz. And, Muniz, I think, will be a big star next year. I don't think he's, I don't know. We don't know an awful lot about his stand-up because he's so good at getting it to the ground, but he is only 31 years old. And, he's now ranked in the top 15. So So I think 2022 could be a big year for him. But yeah, you've gone for one of the breakout stars of the year, Makhachev's victory over Hooker a few weeks ago, which was I'll be honest, a tough one to watch because I'm a big, Dan Hooker's a nice guy. I'm a big Dan Hooker fan. I think everyone is a big Dan Hooker fan. It's tough to see him dominated like that. But yeah, I can understand why you went for Makhachev over Hooker.
Yeah, there was a lot of good things around this fight. The storyline and the submission itself both culminated in this one. And that Islam Makhachev, this was the biggest test of his career. And this was the most dominant victory of his career. He got a quick takedown and advanced to a Kimura. You don't see a Kimura in this era of the UFC very much because usually a Kimura is used to reverse position at this point, or it's used, just to threaten to move to something else. Usually guys are too high of level to fall to a Kimura submission, but Islam Makhachev showed why he's so good and submitted Dan Hooker in the first round very quickly with a Kimura lock of all things. Absolutely love to see it. It is one of the great submissions. It is so visually appealing of a submission. You can show a photograph to anyone in the world and they understand how painful a Kimura lock is, right? So I picked Islam Makhachev, and he's going to have a big 2022 as well. Dan Hooker apparently moving down in weight class. Don't think that's good for him, but it is what it is.
Yeah, for sure. And like you say, you often see the Kimura trap when guys are stood up against the fence, and one wants to get out of the clinch, and they sort of almost put a 50% into a Kimura just to threaten their opponent, and just to sort of almost put them in an awkward position so that they have to sort of walk around to take the pressure off their shoulder and to get out and continue the stand-up game. But like you say, it's rare that we actually see it. But yeah, I agree. Obviously we've got Makhachev versus Beneil Dariush early on. I think it's scheduled for February 2022. So it's
a good fight for
probably going to be but I think it's probably going to get the next contender after Justin Gaethje for Charles Oliveira, assuming that, Oliveira wins. Let's say Oliveira wins the fight against Justin Gaethje. He then faces either Makhachev or Dariush. And like you say, for Hooker, going back down to 145.
I don't know.
It's just, to be honest, it was the power against Chandler that obviously caused him the problem. He had the skill to get past Nasrat Haqparast last time out, and then obviously against Makhachev, it was a skill differential. He obviously hits harder, and he maybe won't be as affected with the power of the guys down at 145. But how much that weight going to take off his chin, we don't know yet. So it'll be interesting to see. But it's also a risk for Hooker.
Yeah.
But yeah, moving on, we've got a comeback of the year. You've got Poirier versus McGregor. I've gone slightly different. Oliveira versus Chandler. So we've got a few sort of honorable mentions as well. We like to do this because they're not, not every fight is easy to just say that is definitely the knockout of the year. That is definitely submission of the year, for example. So for this one, so if we got two more to mention, Reyes versus Berserker. That fight was crazy,
baller. That's an insane fight.
And if you Glover Teixeira, how do you deal with preparing for Yuri Prochazka? Yes, he gets hurt, but yes, then he throws this big spinning elbow or a big up elbow or a flying knee, or he just does crazy stuff, and it's difficult to prepare for him. I think that's what we saw from Reyes this year. He struggled to deal with Prochazka, and obviously led to I think it was a second round knockout, was it? Yeah. So and then we got Diego Ferreira versus Gregory Gillespie. Gillespie,
amazing.
We don't expect Gillespie to get tired. He's got that wrestling base, and historically wrestlers don't get tired. They work, and he got tired in that first round. After he's coming off the big knockout loss to Kevin Lee, but he rallied and got the finish, and I thought that was phenomenal. But for my pick, I went Oliveira versus Chandler. I think after being dropped as heavily, Chandler dropped Oliveira, and Oliveira quite literally just dropped down the center. He didn't stumble backwards. He just dropped on the center line down to his knees. And the way that he rallied to be able to not only survive, but then to finish Chandler, I thought was, and again, with the storyline around that fight of Chandler, the Bellator guy, Oliveira, the UFC guy, phenomenal. And both the comeback itself in the fight and the comeback sort of storyline almost behind it is, for me, goes to Oliveira's victory over Chandler in for the belt.
You know, right before your eyes, I'm changing my answer. Poirier McGregor, get out of here. We've had enough talking about this. I'm actually sick of talking about it too. So I'm going to change my answer. For comeback of the year, I'm going to pick Sergio Pantas versus Kyoji Horiguchi. Before this match, we were actually talking about, is Kyoji Horiguchi the greatest pound for pound Japanese fighter in history? Yeah, he actually is. He's better than Hayata Mahasakurai. He is better than Kazushi Sakuraba. He's one of the most talented fighters in history. His only loss was to Demetrius Johnson. And that's not a big deal. He avenged his loss to Kaya Sakura in dominant fashion. Yes, he is the greatest Japanese fighter in history. And he was dominating this fight against Sergio Pettis. Sergio Pettis was a stepping stone. And then Sergio knocks him out. Sergio has never knocked out anyone in his whole career, and he knocks out Kyoji Horiguchi. That is still one of the most insane things after being dominated round over round. He's barely landing anything and then knocks him out. Yes. Comeback of the year, I'm going to say, is Sergio Pettis versus Kyoji Horiguchi.
And yeah, not only did he knock him out, but it's on our short list for knockout of the year as well. What a knockout it was. He's thrown the high kick. Horiguchi ducked underneath. He's come around with the spinning back fist. And people can say that's a fluke, but he threw that multiple times in the fight itself, and he trained for it. We've seen the footage now from Anthony Pettis. Yeah. That he trained that. You know, if I do miss the high kick, I'll follow it with a spinning back fist. And that's not a fluke by any means.
No.
Because he's tried it so many times. And, you know, you try it 3 or 4 times, it doesn't work. Maybe he doesn't go back to it, but he has so much faith in that technique that he's gone back to it. And like you say, Horiguchi was somewhat cruising to a victory. He wasn't in any danger. You know, anything that Pettis is trying to do is it almost instantly shut down. You know, close the distance. Don't let Pettis go off first. Don't let Pettis be first and last. Take Pettis down if needs be. And like you say, cruising to a victory. And again, the storyline around it, the Rising guy, the UFC guy who went to Bellator, won the belt, then went to Rising, never lost the belt.
Yep.
Competing for the belt that he never actually lost.
Yep.
Then gets knocked out. But both men straight back into that tournament that will obviously commence. I imagine it will start early, sort of February, March time next year.
Amazing.
Don't be surprised. Unless these two are on the same side of the bracket, don't be surprised to see these two in the final facing off in a rematch, which I can't lie, I will be picking Horiguchi in because
I know.
Whether you land a spinning back fist once, fair play. Whether you land it twice on the same guy is if it happens, Horiguchi's got to ask serious questions about his own judgment.
I love it. Comeback of the year. It's always a fun one. What have we got next?
So next up, we've got comeback fighter of the year.
Oh, we picked the same one. Nice.
Yeah.
Brandon Moreno, the nice guy. He was picked last on Tough. He was almost cut from the UFC because of consecutive losses. Now he's a world champion. Go on, Frazer. Tell me about Brandon Moreno.
Yeah, like you say, and the first fight against Figgy, it was a tough fight for Brandon Moreno. The power clearly landed with Figueiredo, and then the adjustments that Moreno was able to make, you know, absolutely slamming out the jab in his face. And like you say, cut from the UFC, fought with LFA, came back.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's that, as ridiculous as it sounds, he's also just a nice guy. You know, you don't hate Brandon Moreno. You know, he's a nice guy. He's still only 28 years old as well, which is, it's ridiculous, really. If you think about it, 28 years old to be having had a career in the UFC, cut, then comes back into the UFC, doesn't get a victory in his first fight back. I think he drew with Askar Askarov, and then to go on the winning run that he went on. And let's be honest, he's getting finishes at 125 pounds. You know, since returning back to the UFC. He got the draw, and he did go 2 decisions. But these guys, Kai Kara France and Justin Formiga, both decision victories. Then he TKO Brandon Royval. Yeah. The draw with Figgy, and then he finished Figgy. But then beforehand in the UFC, yes, he lost back-to-back fights before getting cut, but he had a submission victory, another submission victory, and a split decision victory. And before, you know, even before joining the UFC, submission. Yep. TKO, submission, decision, submission. This guy is a finisher at a weight where people don't typically get finishes.
Yep.
And he's never been finished himself. He's got that grit and determination, that sort of Mexican blood in him. And, you know, obviously the trilogy fight is set for next year. don't be surprised to see a repeat of the second fight, in my opinion. And yeah, comeback fight of the year, Brandon Moreno. Sort of an honourable mention goes to Glover Teixeira, because
Yeah.
it's had a comeback from, he dominated against Alexander Gustafsson in his last victory. His last loss. And he's done it the hard way. He's fought the guys, the Iron Kutalaba, who really, isn't fit to lace Glover's boots. But, there you are. And then you've got the Benil Dariush, who I think he won our comeback of the year. Well, he won my comeback of the year against Jacare Muniz last year.
Mm-hmm.
And then he just, keeps grinding away. Tony Ferguson. A Tony Ferguson victory is obviously the sort of highlight for him. And, comeback fighter of the year, I was going to pick Nick Diaz as the sort of comeback fighter of the year, but the actual fight itself didn't quite materialize into the kind of fight I wanted to see Nick Diaz compete in. And, I'd argue that that's the comeback story of the year, because, from however many years out of the octagon to now, coming back, fighting Robbie Lawler, who he's already previously fought, that first round, the pace that they put on each other. True. But the fight itself, it sort of dwindled away in my mind, and it was not disappointing, but it was a little frustrating. I want to see a little bit more out of Nick Diaz, and now since then we haven't heard anything out of Nick Diaz. For the past couple of months, he was always online, or people were always putting his name in their mouth, and
yeah,
now it's the magic around him has kind of dwindled ever so slightly. The way that Robbie Lawler beat him as well, I think. It's difficult not to pick Brandon Moreno, who put on such a good performance after, like you say, being cut from the UFC, last pick on Tough, now to being a world champion and a dominant world champion. And the way that he beat Figueiredo was dominant. He battered him and then finished him, which is not something that we always see. We see fighters dominate over 5 rounds rather than, looking for the finish like Brandon Moreno did.
Yeah, it's absolute madness that. Sorry, I want to talk about Nick Diaz and Robbie Lawler. I think it's because we had always talked about maybe Nick Diaz can get back in there and get a couple of wins. That fight answered a lot of questions, and the questions were, was Nick any good? And the answer is no, not at this point. He's aged, right? It answered the question.
Exactly.
I think the biggest headline to come out of that fight was when Robbie, after beating him up, Robbie just clobbered him for I think 2.5, 3 rounds, something like that. Just clobbered him. And then he asked, "Are you okay? And are you okay in life?" After going to war, he still went and checked up on his buddy's mental health. And that is the lesson that I want everyone to take from Robbie Lawler and Nick Diaz is check up on your friends. Make sure that they're okay. Really do check up on their mental health. If Robbie Lawler can check up on a guy he just bludgeoned, you can check up on your friends. Okay, so I don't have much to add on Brandon Moreno. He lost to Sergio Pettis and Alexander Pantoja early on in his career, draws against Askar Askarov, and he should be fighting Askar Askarov. Askar Askarov is clearly the top contender in this weight class, but came back, has had an amazing career. Close fight with Figgy. And again, I picked Figgy. God of War is clearly going to get that win back. And Brandon Moreno came back, out jabbed him, and beat him in the next fight. What do we got next? I got nothing to add on Brandon Moreno. You hit the nail on the head.
Nice one, mate. So next up, we got upset of the year. Again, we've differed ever so slightly on this one. I've gone for maybe slight recency bias, Pena over Nunes, and you've gone Moraes over DJ. So
go for it.
So I'll go first then. Yeah. So I mean, come on. It's for me, it's the manner of victory. If Pena was going to beat Nunes, which we both unfortunately said that she had absolutely zero chance, what is the point in this fight? She's 1-on-1 in her last 2. She's not. Her striking's not good. Nunes is going to go in there first or second round TKO. She's going to sort of play with her, and then dominate her. And what happened? We're made to eat our words quite badly, to be honest, mate. Pena went in there, and the first round she was dominated. She was sort of dropped with a jab. It was a bit of a coming together, so I don't think it was scored as a knockdown. She was taken down. She was dominated on the ground. Second round starts like a new fighter. She's gone out there. She's standing and banging with Nunes. Nunes panics, gets tired, and really gasses out badly, easily taken down, and gets the black belt gets submitted with no hooks in. And taps within sort of 5 or 6 seconds.
Yeah.
I'd argue it's because she's tired. Many would argue that it's because she quit in there. But yeah, that's my upset of the year because nobody, I double checked the MMA Sucka staff picks, 9 picks for Nunes, 0 picks for Pena. and rightfully so. No one gave Pena a chance going in there, and I'm not surprised. But like she said, I'm not surprised. Marefas, and fair play to her. I think she's set herself up. Even if she does rematch Nunes and lose like we all predict, she probably would in a rematch. Maybe it sets up a trilogy, and if not, she's set up a big payday for her and her family.
Yeah, absolutely. And Pena versus Nunes might be upset of the year because it's one of the biggest upsets in MMA history that I should be picking it. However, I'm going to stick with Adriano Moraes knocking out Demetrius Johnson. Adriano Moraes, no one was giving much of a chance, even though he was the champion in this fight. He was 1 win and 1 loss in the last 3 years. Like, he wasn't coming in it looking like some world beater. He wasn't some Olympic medalist in the past. He was just a pretty good fighter. And then he knocks out Demetrius Johnson, who was on a win streak. His only loss was a close victory to Henry Cejudo. Like, this guy is maybe just one step out of his prime, but he's still better than anyone else in the whole world. Even right now, if I said Demetrius Johnson's coming back from the UFC, he might be champion. But Adriano Moraes knocked him out using a knee on the ground. Ooh, that is my upset of the year. Absolutely. And you know what? And to speak of how big of an upset this is, no one, including one championship, talks about Adriano Moraes. No one went out there and promoted him like he's the biggest star in the world. You're going to see the UFC push Juliana Pena. She's going to be in every interview. She's going to be at every press conference. She's going to be in every promo. No one cares about Adriano Moraes, and that sucks. Like, really put your foot to the gas. Even like Demetrius Johnson lost, and one championship was still like, okay, well, now he's going to fight. Tank. What's his name? His name is Tank in Thai. Rod Tank. And they're like, yeah, Demetrius Johnson's going to fight Rod Tank. Why are you guys not pushing Adriano Moraes? I'm doing more promotion for Adriano Moraes than anyone else. Anyway, so that's
we'll
my
have to contact One Championship and see if we can get you a gig over there. It's like you say, the only thing for me that takes away ever so slightly from that victory is the fact that it's different rule set to the majority of MMA. KSW, UFC, Bellator, PFL. Is you're allowed the knees on the ground, which obviously ultimately was what it was for Johnson. But that can't take away from the victory because Johnson signed up to those rules and he knows the rules. And he could have done it to Moraes and well, as we've seen, vice versa, Moraes did it over Johnson. And
that's right.
Maybe that's the only sort of asterisk next to that victory. But like I say, these guys sign up to these rules set. You don't go to a boxing match and so we saw at the weekend Sean Strickland saying that he thought it was a Submission Underground was a wrestling tournament. Come on, mate. If you get you sign up to a rule set. If you don't read the contract, it's your own problem. And it's I think both of these, because of the way how dominant Johnson is and how dominant Nunes is, both of these upsets are up there for the upset of the year, clearly, as we both picked them. But moving on. It. Breakout fight of the year. We spoke off air about this guy. Cyril Gane has had a sneaky good year, from people taking him seriously because you have to, because of the skill set he has. Interim world champion, set up a world championship shot next year with Francis Ngannou.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the way that he's done it. He's dominated each and every opponent that he's faced so far, and these aren't the sort of slouch guys that he's dominated. He's last time out, he obviously TKO'd Derek Lewis, and this is when Derek Lewis was in good shape. Derek Lewis took this fight very seriously.
Yes,
he's then outpointed both Alexander Volkov and Jairzinho Rozenstruik over 5 rounds, and
that's for a big deal
for a heavyweight to do that. It's not easy. And if we just look in the calendar year, today is what we're filming this on the 14th of December.
Mm-hmm.
If we filmed this 2 days ago, in one calendar year, we would have gone 4-0, having beat JDS. Beat JDS on the 12th of December last year.
That's a good point.
A calendar year, Cyril Gane has, arguably male fighter of the year. If you look at the caliber of guys, and it's the way that he beat Derek Lewis for me in that title fight, and the fact that yes, he's defeated JDS at the end of last year, but then this year he's gone on. He's beaten Rozenstruik by unanimous decision. He's beaten Volkov by unanimous decision. Then he's bigged up that then to defeat Derek Lewis by TKO. And I think going into the heavyweight title fight, cards on the table, I'm picking Cyril Gane.
There's a lot I want to throw at you, but Cyril Gane, yeah, he was in contention for male fighter of the year as well because he had 3 big wins, 3 headlines, 3 wins in the top 5, really. And that's a big deal. And he fought once in 2020, which wasn't exactly his fault. Like you said, a year ago back in December, he beat up Junior Dos Santos, as you need to as a contender. That's just like a rite of passage at heavyweight. And then he beat Volkov, Rosenstruck, and Lewis, both top 5 fighters in UFC heavyweight division, headlined 3 times, and now he's the interim championship, set up with a title fight against Francis Ngannou. And this was one of the reasons that he was signed after 3 fights, like 3 fights in France, and then UFC picked him up right away. And it goes to show he's still undefeated. He has no official losses in Muay Thai bouts as well. He is what you need to look like to be a good striker in MMA. He is the advanced striker of MMA, using long jabs, front kicks, using the full arsenal, but using defensive, your feet move first, not worrying about head movement. He looks like if John Jones continued to advance his striking, this is what it would kind of look like. This is what John Jones was showing guys 10 years back, and people weren't picking up on it. But Cyril Gane, yeah, he's probably the best striker in UFC heavyweight history. And does he beat Francis Ngannou? Yeah, probably. I can't argue.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, like you say with John Jones, he's flat-footed though. Jones, he looks more for the counters, whereas Cyril Gane's got that in and out movement that we spoke about, last week with Lomachenko.
Yeah,
it's tough, it's hard, and clearly no one's been able to work out the puzzle yet. He hasn't struggled in any of his fights this far, I think.
No, not even close. No one's even pushed him, and he's outpointers like Volkov and Rosenstruck, right?
Exactly, yeah. And I think with these breakout fighters of the year, I think an honorable mention has got to go to Makhachev, like obviously you've mentioned, or we've mentioned with the submission of the year, your pick. Derek Brunson's had a really good year as well. Sort of.
Yep.
I'm reluctant to call him a breakout fighter because of what. Let's be honest, he's been in the UFC for years. He's been in the Strikeforce for years. But and I've waxed lyrical about this girl so much. Casey O'Neill for me is got a rough ordeal not to have got my breakout of the year.
Yeah,
debuting in the UFC at women's flyweight, where traditionally finishes aren't sort of top of the bill. These people don't get finishes at women's flyweight, unfortunately, because there's either not the power there, or the skill differential isn't too huge between each lady. But
that's true.
She's now ranked number 15. She's 3-0 in the UFC in this year with 3 finishes, all TKOs. 2 TKOs and a submission. My apologies. So. And wins over Antonia Shevchenko. She set up a big fight. I think she's got Roxy Modafferi early next year. I can't see her losing that fight, to be honest. And that sets up even bigger fights going forward for Casey O'Neill. And to be debuting in this year, going 3-0 with 3 finishes at a weight that doesn't particularly historically produce a lot of finishes is nothing short of impressive for Casey O'Neill. So if we had a male and a female breakout fighter, for me, Cyril Gane and Casey O'Neill, but I think Cyril Gane, just because of the sort of the upper echelons of the division that he's fighting in, gets my vote this year for overall breakout fighter of the year.
Great picks on those ones. Absolutely love it. Let's move forward. Event of the year.
I think, we've got 2 left: event of the year and
both
team of
picks.
The year.
Can't argue with either one. UFC 268, obviously, it was just a couple weeks ago. It might be recency bias, but we had big knockout Marlon Vera versus Frankie Edgar. Even on the undercard, we had my boy Alex Ferreira getting a big flying knee knockout. Bobby Green gets a win over Ala Iaquinta into retirement. Chris Curtis gets a big win on it as well. Chris Curtis was one guy we didn't talk about very much this year, and we probably should have, but maybe 2022 is really his year to put a stamp on things. Rose Namajunas and Weili Zhang have a very close fight. Justin Gaethje and Chandler go to war on UFC 268, and Kamaru Usman and Colby Covington have another great fight. UFC 268 is an all classic, and it was set up to be that, and it worked out well. You picked UFC 259, great event. Break it down for us.
Yeah, for sure. We've got the three title fights. Jan Blachowicz caused the upset over Israel Adesanya in his pursuit of a light heavyweight belt. Amanda Nunes doing the triangle sort of inverted triangle armbar thing. I don't even know what to describe as, against Megan Anderson. And then we had the controversy between Aljamain Sterling and Petr Yan. And despite the fact that this card took place in March, it's already aged very well. On the early prelims, we had Sean Brady fighting. We had Amanda Lemos fighting. These guys are now up there in the division. Opening up the ESPN card, we had Kai Kara France got a huge victory this weekend over Cody Garbrandt. We had Askar Askarov defeating Joseph Benavidez. Again, this is aging well. We had Dominic Cruz getting his first victory back after dropping the fight to Henry Cejudo.
Yep.
Rakic versus Santos didn't quite live up to the sort of barn burner that we thought it would be, but that's kind of the story of Santos this year. Is he's had 2 fights against Rakic where we expected him to do a lot more in the fight, and he didn't. And then he had the fight against Johnny Walker where we thought that would be a barn burner, and it was a bit of a sleeper. Yeah. And then Islam Makhachev defeated Drew Dober. I think top to bottom, the way that card has aged, as far as most of the people on there have gone on to be top 10 guys. Like I say, Amanda Lemos, Sean Brady. We've even got Trevin Jones. He opened up the card and did well in that fight, but then he lost last time out. But we've got plenty of fighters on that card. Song Yadong was on the card and lost. Casey Kenny lost to Dominic Cruz. Drew Dober lost to Makhachev. But I think the storyline coming out of it of Jan Blachowicz defeating Israel Adesanya, Nunes doing what Nunes does, and then the controversy over Aljamain Sterling and Petr Yan. I thought there's a lot of storylines coming out of it from a media point of view for us to write about. So it's my event of the year, I think.
That was a big one, and I enjoyed covering it as well. I think that was a great event right there. Let's move forward. We got Gym of the Year, I think, is next.
Yeah, it is.
Elevation Fight Team with Trevor Whitman. It's hard to argue anyone else really had a stamp this year. I mean, AKA and ATT are kind of always in the discussion. Nova União is always in the discussion. Chute Box had a few moments, but Trevor Whitman just consistent. He had 1 loss this year in title fights, and that was no, I don't even know if that's true. I don't think he had any losses.
I don't think he did.
Yeah.
He's now got Usman, who went, as we said earlier, 3-0, and you can see the improvements of Kamaru Usman from working with Henry Hoof to working with Trevor Whitman. He uses the jab, he uses footwork, he's good in the stand-up game, and he's still got the wrestling to fall back on. Rose Namajunas, clearly in the first fight against Wiley Zhang, that was drilled. It was drilled that to hit the low kick, go high, because she's going to slide out of the way of the low kick. When you slide out of the way, obviously your head comes forward ever so slightly. Yeah. And we know what happened there. And Justin Gaethje, it is what it is against Khabib. You can game plan against Khabib as much as you want, but when Khabib is that is what it is. But then for him to come back the way he did against Michael Chandler, land the uppercut and obviously drill the uppercut is phenomenal. I think what's helped, Trevor Whitman's team is that other teams haven't had a great year. ATT alone, at the end of this year, lost the belt with Amanda Nunes, didn't have Joanna competing. Dustin Poirier lost the belt.
Yep.
Against Charles Oliveira. It's been rough. Eugene Barman's, City Kickboxing
mixed,
had a good year, but 1-1 with Israel Adesanya. Dan Hooker's obviously 1-2. Kai Kara France is 2-0. It's Brad Riddell's obviously just been knocked out by Rafael Fiziev, so it's difficult for those guys to be really in the question. And then you've always got like you say, the Nova Uniãos and the ATTs, the AKAs. But I think, SBG's had a dreadful year with McGregor and James Gallagher now losing, and Peter Queally losing, and Gunnar Nelson not competing at all. They've had a reasonable amateur year, but SBG at one point, they had James Gallagher on the rise, Peter Queally on the rise over in Fight Nights Global. McGregor obviously doing what McGregor does. Johnny Walker's there now. He lost this year. So SBG has really gone downhill. But it's difficult to vote against anyone that isn't Trevor Whitman. And again, for the second year in a row, Trevor Whitman has shown just how elite a coach he is.
Yeah, and it's absolutely insane. And it was nice on UFC 268 as well. You got to hear him tell, like, he coaches to his fighters, and it's a hard thing to do. And like Greg Jackson, when he was really in his prime of coaching, this is something that we mentioned with him, is that he spoke to every fighter differently. He spoke to Diego Sanchez a lot differently than he spoke to John Jones or Rashad Evans, George St. Pierre. They all got unique talks. And at UFC 268, Trevor Whitman was telling Rose of like, take it, like, have fun in there. You're taking this too seriously. If you get two in your head, you're going to start losing. And then he would tell Justin Gaethje the opposite. Stop having fun in there. You need to start thinking a little bit more tactically. Do you remember what happened last time you had fun? And then Kamaru Usman, he just straight up told him exactly what he needs to do tactically. So he adjusts his coaching for each fighter. And that shows, like, you're a great coach, Trevor Whitman. Like, he is absolutely deserving of this title. Coach of the Year in 2021. There is no one else.
Yeah, for sure. And I think just having the 3 or 4 elite fighters in that gym helps Trevor Whitman. You know, he's not having to travel all over the country every weekend to, you know, I've got a corner. Admittedly, 268, he did have the 3 fighters, which is why they slightly changed around the scheduling with Justin Gaethje, 2 fights, Muniz and Usman. But ordinarily that wouldn't happen. You know, that was quite a rare thing to happen. He can game plan specifically for each of his sort of elite fighters there, and he doesn't have, like I say, he doesn't have like a team of 200 fighters that are all competing where he's got to be in the gym from 9 till 10 every night, you know.
Yeah.
9 in the morning till 10 at night, drilling things for people all day. He can just focus on his Kamaru Usmans, his Rose Namajunas, his Justin Gaethje's, and then when neither of them are in camp like now, I mean, Justin Gaethje will probably be sort of tuning it up towards the Charles Oliveira fight, but he can then focus on maybe some of the up and comers, which I think, you know, it does pay dividends, you know, because at the end of the day, you can't spread yourself too wide because it just won't pay off for you. And yeah, I think the fact that he's got a smaller team, like you say, there's no other picks, just Trevor Whitman, Coach of the Year, Gym of the Year.
Absolutely. So we've wrapped up our yearly MMA Sucka Podcast 2021 awards. I think all deserving. We agreed on the most part, and the ones that we disagreed with were just plain fun anyway. Now, 2022 is coming up, and we start with a Cyril Gane versus Ngannou heavyweight title fight. What other outlandish, ridiculous predictions do you have for 2022? Or you can keep them a secret, and we can just keep it in an article, and I'll link it down below. What do you think?
Yeah, so I do an article. I'll keep the majority. I usually do sort of 10 outlandish predictions for the year. Just off the top of my head, I think, you know, I think it might even be, you know, you might end the year with you probably won't make the article because it's just me sort of ad-libbing, but, you know, Beneil Dariush could easily find his way to finishing the year as champion, you know.
You're right. That is ridiculous. That is ridiculous.
If he defeats Makhachev, which I don't think he'd do, but, you know, these are outlandish predictions. He could defeat Makhachev, go on to face the winner of Gaethje Oliveira and capture the belt. But no, for example, I had a pick last year that McGregor would return against Poirier for the lightweight belt because, and, you know, capture the lightweight belt only to lose it in his next fight. That was my prediction, and obviously that didn't come to pass because he was KO'd in the second round. But you know, it's just a bit of fun, and you just, you know, we pick slightly random, try and go. You know, I said that my prediction was that Bellator keep on giving Dylan Dennis, James Gallagher, and Valerie Loreda gimme fights. Well, Dylan Dennis didn't fight at all. Valerie Loreda lost against Hannah Guy and then won her next fight. And James Gallagher was giving, I think, Cal Eleanor and then Patchy Mix, who he ultimately lost to in the third round about a month ago. So they're just sort of quite random picks like that. But we've got, you know, we're gonna have plenty of content over the sort of festive period. We won't be meeting again for a podcast now, probably until the new year. Tim's away, so we've got the UFC 269 review show on the site already, and then so we'll catch up with you again in the new year.
Let's do a rapid fire, just real quick. Is this person going to be holding their title this time next year? We'll rapid fire through every weight class. Does Brandon Moreno, yes or no?
Yes.
I'm going to say no. Aljamain Sterling?
Unfortunately not.
Yeah, no. Alexander Volkonovsky?
No.
Ooh, I'll say yes.
Ooh.
Okay, perfect. Charles Oliveira.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm gonna say yes as well. Kamaru Usman.
Yes.
Yeah, probably. Israel Adesanya.
No.
No. Okay, I'll pick no as well, and I don't know why, but I just have
Yeah,
a
I have no
feeling.
idea what that's based on, but just
Glover Teixeira.
unfortunately not.
No, there's no possible way. Francis Ngannou, we've already talked about. Probably
We've
not.
already talked about. No, it's going to be Cyril Gane. I think we'll hold it. We'll capture it in January and hold it for the rest of the year, I believe.
I think so too. Rose Namajunas.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll say no for now.
Valentina quality of
Valentina.
opposition, I think.
Yeah, I can't tell. Valentina Shevchenko.
Yeah, why not? You
Give me
know,
a
although
give me a
I
Tatiana.
mentioned
Tatiana Suarez. I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah, I forget
one
about.
Arguably, she's
Yeah.
one win away from a title in
Yeah,
that weight class.
I'll go yes, but I can fully understand and no vote.
That's absolutely fair. Lastly, Juliana Pena.
It's going to be tough. I think it's going to be tough. I enjoy the fact that we're not even talking about the featherweight division because there isn't a featherweight division.
Get it.
You know, it is what it is. But I'm going to go Juliana Pena. Unfortunately for her, she's a nice girl, but not a chance.
Not a chance. Check the links below. My name's Tim Wheaton. You can find more Tim Wheaton MMA. He's Frazer Crone. Links for all of our social medias will be down below. We'll have some articles linked as well. Thanks so much for tuning in, folks, and we'll talk to y'all soon.
Nice one. Thank you.